Welcome back to Heart Path Podcast. I'm your host, Terra Kenzie Longacre, a modern day mystic, author, transformational and spiritual embodiment coach, and retreat leader. In each episode, we will explore topics around spirituality, empowerment, divine embodiment, resiliency of the human spirit, and heart-based business, and beyond. In this episode, we have our guest, Ashleigh Grange, who is an award-winning integrative health practitioner. She specializes in spiritual coaching, subconscious reprogramming, Akashic records readings, and energy healing. She has built her practice on a simple truth. True healing happens when we honor our mind, body, and spirit connections. She blends science with intuitive wisdom to help address the root cause or causes of physical, emotional, and spiritual health challenges, and to activate that deep personal transformation. Whether you want to increase energy, release old emotions, or feel more alive, she will meet you with compassion, cheerleading, and practical solutions. We have a wonderful guest today on Heart Path Podcast, Ashleigh Grange, who is an intuitive health practitioner. She specializes in spiritual coaching, subconscious reprogramming, Akashic records readings, and energy healing. And I have had the pleasure of getting to know Ashleigh first through Akashic initiation, and it was such a wonderful experience to have you in the program, and then just to even get to connect with you beyond that. Very happy to have you here. Welcome.
Welcome. And I got to see you in person in the fall too. So
Yes.
extra bonus.
See, I love where we can meet people, online in the virtual spaces, and then you get to meet them in real life. It's
Yes.
so cool. It's like, oh my gosh. Ah!
Oh my gosh, you look just like your picture.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I find when we had that interesting time in the world where things were shut down and people couldn't say, and like so many people were meeting online. I know. So many people were meeting online, and then it's like the world opened again and getting to connect with people. But that's a tangent. That's a whole other place we don't need to go because we're here for you. Hey.
I'm here for you, so that's perfect.
Yeah. So please tell, because that intro was just scratching the surface of what you're doing. So please share with the folks a little bit about who you are and your journey to get here, because you're now doing the spiritual coaching and things have shifted for you over the last couple years with the way you're doing things.
Yes. So, and I see the Akashic records as being that tipping point for me, right? Because it really was a way of stepping into talking to people at all levels, not just the physical body, which I had spent many years doing. I was a nutritionist for over a decade and really just focusing on the physical body. And then we started to realize, oh, the emotional body, there's some things that we could play with here. And then the mental body, and then of course the spiritual body, which is not the last but not least, as they say. And it's really just a way of seeing our souls at a deeper level. And one thing that my bio doesn't mention is that I'm a mama. So that definitely changed everything for me. I now have a 5-year-old. So for me, even getting to use all the practices that I use in my day-to-day life and in my professional life, being able to use them with him is amazing, right? Like just deep breathing and teaching him about flower essences. And I've I love to share, like, with parents, there's so much that we can do, so many ways we can empower ourselves to kind of step out of the traditional medical system and really empower our health to make big changes. So for me, having access to things like flower essence is such a beautiful way of just shifting our emotional state, shifting our energy, and really being part of that subconscious reprogram that I'm talking about now.
How did and I, like, we've chatted before, however, for the folks out there, how did flower essences find you?
Yes, so that's actually a really cool story. Well, I think it's cool. It was actually my dad's medical doctor that, I guess, introduced or really brought flower essences into my life. So I was in my mid 20s, and my dad, he hadn't been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's yet, but he was about to be diagnosed with that. And his doctor gave me a sheet one day that had all of these kind of mental health supports. And of course, they always say like it's a terminal illness. There's not a lot you can do to cure it. Alzheimer's is not a curable disease. However, one of the things that was on that little sheet, and it was hilarious when I look back at, I still have it. I look back at it, but it was actually printed off a dot matrix printer.
Oh,
Well, it tells you like how old this piece of paper was. It looked like it had been probably like copied so many times. And I have this paper and I remember looking at it being like, what is this from? And then I realized that was the moment where I saw flower essences on it. But looking back, that's 15 years old now, this paper that I have. And yeah, one of the things on there was flower essences. And I remember thinking like, I don't know what that is. Like, I understand, okay, mental health, we weren't talking about that in the same way that we were 15 years ago. But I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then rescue remedy is one of the big ones that people often find. And, it's like we can use it with our animals. We can use it with our parents, all through. And then obviously kids as well. So that was kind of my first mini introduction in that, I have really been using flower essences for 15 years. And now obviously professionally. So, and I actually my flower essence, one of my practitioner trainings was actually down in Arizona. So
oh,
that's where I first did it, was down in Tucson. So that was back in 2019. So
oh,
yeah,
wow.
it's been time
And
flies. I was 6 months pregnant and I was like trying to survive the desert and I was like, what am I doing? But I have to be there. I remember thinking at the time, so that was in the spring of 2019. I remember thinking at that time, like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. Because the idea of, doing the training after I had the baby, I knew it would be, I didn't realize how long, but it would be a number of years before I was kind of back fully in action. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I just have to do it. It doesn't matter if I'm pregnant. I just gotta, you just think what happened a year later and the world changing, right? And it's like, if I hadn't done it, then, I'd still be waiting to do it. So, yeah.
so what is the theory? These are interesting wording. The theories or the methodologies around flower essences. Like what is the practical?
Yeah, so it's a vibrational shift. So when we make a flower essence, for example, we have, a bowl of, Dr. Bach always recommended like spring water. So it's, the purest water we could find. It's not going to be chlorinated. It's not going to be anything that's, kind of out of a city tap. Some people use distilled water just for longer longevity, but you have your crystal bowl. He recommended crystal bowl with spring water, and he would float the flowers on top of the water. And then, so to make the flower essence, the water or the flowers are extracted. So we strain out the flowers, and then that water, by virtue of this, I call it alchemy between the sun and the flowers. It's really the flowers themselves imprint their vibration into the water. So I always recommend, if people are kind of new to this concept, to look into Dr. Emoto's work.
Hmm.
Like, it was the Japanese scientist that, he would do all these little tests, right, of saying to the water, like, I love you and I hate you, and all the crystalline patterns that were created. So it's a neat way of really having like a real physical aspect of how these vibrations from these plants, and we use not just flowers, but obviously gems and other, there are practitioners that use mushrooms, and they do like a 28-day cycle that's in alignment with the lunar cycle. So it's really a way for that water to capture that frequency. So that in itself is the mother tincture. That's the flower essence itself. And then, of course, we use a preservative to have it last for a much longer time. So it's really like when we think about, the physical body, and if people are in alignment with the idea that each part of our body is vibrating at a certain frequency, the flower essences themselves will shift us. So there's different ways that it might just, kind of, we think about in the brain, but, neuroplasticity, it's going to create new nerves. It's going to allow the brain to do things in a different way. It's going to remove layers of trauma. It's going to remove limiting beliefs. It's really powerful to see them in action, right? Like, sometimes you'll see a reaction within a day of something that has been long-standing for 30 years. Sometimes flowers will show up in the garden when you need the most, and that
Oh,
happens to me with Star of Bethlehem, which is this great shock and trauma remedy. And I remember going through something, and suddenly it appeared in my garden, and I thought to myself, what is that? And then I realized I'd never seen it before, and I haven't seen it since. But that summer I needed it, and so it's just amazing to see. I use them for different things too. Like, flower essences themselves tend to be, it's not about categorizing them, but they tend to be more ethereal. They tend to be more kind of higher frequency energies. Whereas gems, like making a crystal essence, for example, is going to be so grounding. It's going to be so rooting. It's going to help us become stable. So I always recommend, when things like solar flares and whatnot are going on, gem essences are a great way to bring us back down into our body because things are just sparking everywhere, right?
Mm. Oh, so if someone, because you do consultations for
Yes.
flower,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
yeah, like how does that look slash work or flow? Like, because flower essences essentially are for anybody and
Yes.
everybody, of course,
Yes.
having an open mind and heart to it. But at the same time, what do you find people are seeking support for them the most, or when they're coming to you looking for that?
Sometimes they don't always know. It's
Mm,
like I have this pattern, I'm doing this thing over and over. I have a limiting belief, one's about abundance, things that, obviously have come from childhood or beyond. And it's so people are coming with something that's just been bothering them. And it's kind of this idea like I've tried everything else, I might as well try this, right? How much, in complementary healthcare, it's like we get to the point where we're so desperate, we literally have no other options.
yeah.
Flower essences can provide that way. And one of the real principles of my work, and I say this all the time, is that the physical health ailment is always underlied by at least one emotional or mental issue,
Mm,
right? So it's like when we think about the energy body itself, it starts out kind of in this field around the body, and then slowly over time, if we don't address it, it starts trickling in, and then eventually it starts to affect the physical body. So that can be a big concept for people, right? Just even this idea, I use a simple example of something like candida, right? So someone who has a yeast infection, when we think about some of the emotional, metaphysical aspects around that, it's like perhaps it's the yeast is a physical manifestation of how this is showing up in the body, but maybe it's the fact that you've been a doormat your whole life. Maybe it's the fact that you've been people pleasing. And what happens with opportunistic things like yeast is that they go everywhere, right? They take over, right?
mhm,
So it's this idea of feeling like overcome, or this idea of people pleasing, not being authentic to yourself. You don't have a true sense of where yourself is. You don't have a good
mhm.
sense of where your boundaries are. So like, what does yeast do? But it literally takes over everything. So it's
Infiltrates.
at a fundamental level, it's someone who doesn't have any boundaries, right? So
Oh,
you
no.
think about people that you and I work with all the time, it's empaths and highly sensitive people. They don't even realize that there's another option. And so funny, it's like spirit is sending me in that direction. But the first flower essence I ever used was yarrow, which is this beautiful essence for boundaries and empaths and super
Mm,
sensitive people. And I remember thinking like, oh, I feel like I have a shield on. It's like an energetic shield now. And
yes.
and there's a Bach remedy called walnut that's really good for that too. And
Mm,
I took that during COVID. I just take 2 little drops in my hand, rub it around, do one of these, and I was like, I am a superhero, and I'd be able to go into the grocery store and like completely unaffected by everything around me. I just felt like, wow, I'm like, it just strengthens your energetic system. And if people don't believe in it, I always say, like, just try it. Literally just put some in your hands, run it through your body, and just see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, then you don't have to continue using it. But I bet you will want to use it.
see, and I love that, to give them the option. It's like you don't
Yeah,
have to try it, but you could, and then
exactly.
you might
For,
notice something.
I think of like for $10 or $12 to have a bottle that will literally last you, hundreds of uses. Like
Right.
I think of all the talk therapy that people have done in their lives. It's like maybe you just need a flower essence.
Well, because that's perfectly with the subconscious reprogramming
Yes,
that you've spoken about, because it is subtle. It's being
yes,
able to come into you in a way that you wouldn't even fully, well, I can't say understand, but it's in a non-invasive way.
yes. And I think the key, like any time, like obviously when people have a lot of complex cases, they have a lot of trauma. Sometimes it's hard to be as self-aware as you might need to be to notice those shifts. I like this practice of called motivational interviewing, and obviously you could figure out a way to do that with yourself through journaling or whatnot. But it's a way of kind of tapping in and saying like, what's the likelihood that I might continue to do this practice out of 10, right? So it's like, as a nutritionist, I would say, can you drink more water? Can you, have breakfast every day? Can you go for a 10-minute walk, right? And if they were like, well, there's a 4 out of 10 chance I'm going to do that. not a high likelihood, right? So we want to get people to the point of doing it
Oh,
7,
they're
8
gonna do
times.
it.
But then the truth is that you come back a month later and I'm like, oh, so how's that knee pain going? What knee pain? Like they just don't have any memory of it, right? Because it's gone. Now that's not part of your awareness. You don't have to dwell on it. So it's like, oh, okay, well maybe the flower essence helped you, right? Like
Yeah.
not always so fast, but those shifts can really remind us like we're constantly evolving and changing and just growing physically and mentally, emotionally. I mean, it's that idea of the growth mindset, right? So if people are self-aware and they're kind of tapped in, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I notice I don't get angry at my husband in the same way that I do. I notice I have a lot more patience in the morning when I'm getting my kid ready for school. And just,
Mm.
yeah, little shifts like that. And sometimes the shifts can be dramatic, right? We can have memories that come up from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like I said, and beyond of things that we've experienced and gone through. And, kind of like ancestral healing. It's a good way of just clearing that slate. So it's truly amazing what you can accomplish with those aspects and just, yeah, those mind shifts, right?
And it's a beautiful relationship with the plants,
Yes.
right? With nature and being able to incorporate that because we're part of nature, and so it's just that why wouldn't they work, right? It's not synthetic. It's something that
Exactly.
comes from the earth. Like
Yeah.
we're vibrational beings.
It's this idea of being in right relationship with the plants too, right? Like as you said, we're from nature. We rely on Mother Earth.
Yeah.
We're, those of us who have our hands in the dirt all the time. It's like we can even use flower essences on our flowers, right? It's
Oh,
a little meta, but they love it, right? So flowers that house plants that have, kind of seen better days and they're starting.
oh,
It's like, oh, I just give you a little bit of stress relief, and suddenly they perked up, and you see their aura change, right? Like you see the energetics on the change, right?
oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah,
So thank you for sharing that. I would not have thought of that, but it makes sense.
yeah.
So
I love that they're just like so portable too,
yeah,
right? Like just a little bottle can go with you everywhere. Like people I think are expecting like this, kind of grand aspect. And I will say that in the same way that, when people talk about homeopathy, it's like the right remedy is important. So just using any flower essence is not going to make a difference. You have to kind of choose flower essences that are going to suit your particular situation and
well, and
use them often enough.
hmm?
And use them often enough.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like there's because it's there's going to be different prescriptions
Mhm.
for the person depending on their situation. For you, how have you seen your practice shift with the flower essences or even the evolution of the way in which you work with them over time because it's 15 years
Yeah.
of being in that.
Yeah, and I use them personally, obviously, so
Yeah,
more professionally since I've did my last training that I
right.
did
Of course.
in Arizona, and it introduced me to so many other branches. So, I used to think that, and some Bach practitioners would say like you only need the Bach remedies. There's 38 remedies; they will suit any case, all situations, and that I haven't found that to be true. I'm really drawn to also using plants that are local to my native area. I love kind of recommending plants that are suitable for people in different areas, and then obviously working with gems, which is a totally different field. Um, and sorry.
When did you start incorporating the gem essences?
I would say probably within the last 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, probably within the last 3 to 4 years. And something that I always recommend, like I do a lot of custom blends now. So someone will contact me, like I ship all over North America. So for people who are like, oh, I need a blend that does da da da, usually I do a consult with it and they kind of tell me what they're working on. I always include at least one gem essence in there because it doesn't not only increase all the flowers that are in there, but it also just allows all the other remedies to work better. So I just find that's kind of it's this very high potency frequency type of energy. And so sometimes we just need to ground ourselves so that we can actually, because I'm sure as well as I do that one of the most kind of key parts of spiritual practice is being grounded.
Oh yeah.
When we are not grounded, we cannot do our best spiritual work. So,
No.
and
Or
also,
even create in our lives. Like it's like
yes,
you need to be grounded to actually pull through the divine
wisdom.
inspiration
Yes.
or to create. And we're
Otherwise, people can end up with health issues, right? Think of all the people that are ungrounded and then suddenly something happens and you realize it's just because you're not grounded. When's the last time you went outside and hugged a tree?
oh, I know, and the trees like it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mutual, mutual.
So when did things start to shift for you? You had mentioned the Akashic Records was a tipping point. However, when did things start to shift for you where you were looking more um, at the spiritual self as well? Because even with the flower essences, there is a spiritual component. The focus is the emotional realms, but there's still that spirituality. So yeah, what shifted where you started to look at people? I want to say in even a more holistic way of incorporating the soul.
That I mean, the timeline is very clear for me. So having taken care of my dad for so many years, it was the point at which he was close to the end. So that was what they call palliative care. And I would go to I was 33 and I would go to the nurses and I say, what happens when you die? Like, what can I expect? Like it's very different when it's a parent versus, somebody else in your family that passes away and you don't have that, day-to-day connection. But being in palliative care for 6 weeks, you're basically living, he was in long-term care at that point. So you're basically living there. And so for me, that was a really like what is after this? What is after this? And so that he died in 2016. And then the first time I had been interested in those topics kind of along the way and really dove into the Akashic Records. So for me, funny enough, my first experience of going into the Akashic Records was going in spontaneously in 2020. So just around actually maybe a couple months after everything kind of got started. So I was in the garden in 2020. I had a 6, 7 month old baby at the time, and I just spontaneously ended up there. And so I was doing a plant attunement. I was just trying to connect with the plant, whatever that looked like, and kind of like talk to it and communicate and whatever, and ended up in the Akashic Records with this massive channeling of what the flower was meant to be used for and how we could use it and all these, kind of aspects that nobody had covered. And I remember asking, once I had more practice in the Akashic Records, like, why am I being called to do this work? Why am I being called to work with the plants in this way? And they were saying, there's information that you need to bring forward that nobody has talked about before. So I thought, oh, bring the clients and I'll talk more about it.
Right.
But yeah, so for me, that's yeah, I wouldn't, it's not quite a decade, but 9 years since that real spiritual development happened, and all the things, right? Like, how do I become more psychic, and how do I become more intuitive? Not even realizing like we've our whole lives we've been intuitive. It's just a question of tapping into it. It's like, oh, that's right. When I had that expectation of something that was going to happen, it was like, oh, that's an intuitive information, right?
Yeah. Well, and I love when you were saying even where you were asking like why am I being called to do this? Why the plants? And you receive the information that you're going to bring through insights that nobody else has. And you might see this as well with other clients that you have,
Mhm.
because we on a soul level, each of us are connected to specific spaces of origin, we could say, or even like that soul history that we have. And who knows how many lifetimes you have been heavily
Yeah.
involved with the plant realm.
Yes.
We'll just even say like the plant realms or bio like the
Natural world.
I want to say biology, but like from the plant perspective.
Plant consciousness, we'll say.
Plant consciousness, absolutely. So, and have you explored that more since that questioning of why am I drawn to that? Like, have you explored that a little bit more of the role that you've had in other lifetimes or life expressions?
I have. Oh, I love that. Life expressions. I love that.
Mm.
And it's funny, actually, anytime I've done Akashic Records reading with people, anytime I've done channeled reading, and anything that I've done, it always comes back, oh, you have this past life as a herbalist. And I'm like, okay, tell me something different. I know that one. I know that one. So I always find that funny where I'm like, did I have lifetimes doing anything else? But,
Mm.
lots of different ones. I remember definitely one where I was like a little old lady and I was blind, and I was like, oh man, because I go around, I don't like to turn the lights on all the time, and I can always really easily navigate, and I'm like, oh, maybe that's why. And so it was like we were trading, rather than trading for money, we were trading like herbs for whatever the ailment was, and they would bring me like apples, and they would bring me things that maybe I couldn't find in that local area. So I always find that really, I'm like, okay, like I'm definitely on purpose. It's just a question of like, sometimes there's this feeling of like waiting for the rest of the world to show up, right? Because
Mm.
now people are starting to discover flower essence, which is really beautiful. But I want to like show from the rooftops and tell people like anybody can literally use these kind of tools, right? And it's like just a little bottle, and you can travel with it, and you can all those aspects. So yeah, I've definitely dug into some of that, as a way of, just reminding myself what I'm here to do. I
Mm.
love that idea of life expressions too, because it's
Well,
like I'm probably a herbalist in other lifetimes too. Currently.
absolutely. Well, and I honestly, I get hung up on the whole terminology of past lives now
Yes,
because
totally.
we're multidimensional and because you are fulfilling that life as the herbalist in many different expressions right now,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
then we're here together right now.
That's exactly what my thought or perspective was. It's like, what
Right.
am I inventing in, those other lifetimes that's going to help support us, right? In the concurrent, parallel lives, right? I think that's a better expression of saying parallel lives.
Parallel lives, right? Because it's all happening, and then it's like, how can you pull it through to you? How can you
Exactly.
work with it, or
That's
push things away?
I think that's probably one of the questions in your program too, is how do we call in some of the gifts and talents from previous lifetimes. So I love including that. Like I have a master list of questions that people can always ask with an Akashic reading, and I'm always like, just dig in, right? Like what draws you and what kind of lights you up. So
Ooh, let's talk about Akashic Records now. This
oh
feels like a
sure,
perfect segue. Flower essences. So
Our-
you do Akashic Records readings, at coaching and support. So what, like,
yeah.
talk
What's that look
Akashic
like?
Records to
Well,
me.
since I graduated from the program, I have clients all over the world now, which is so fun. I have clients in Australia, I have clients in Greece, clients obviously all throughout the US, which is really cool. And I love that more people are finding it. Like they'll, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I have had people tell me, and actually a client found me, or potential client, found me a couple weeks ago by typing into Chat GPT, like, who is the best Akashic Records reader in the GTA? And apparently my name came up, and she's like, who's this? And I was like, I guess based on testimonials, I was like, what? You found me through what? So
Oh,
I
that's
thought that was so fun.
amazing.
So that you never know where your marketing will come from. And sometimes AI is, supporting us all. Or you think like, how does that even happen, right? So it's like,
Yes.
what it's obviously crawling the web, so I guess it's based on that. But I remember thinking like, and it gave her my phone number and everything, so I thought that was,
Oh,
yeah, so wild.
ChatGPT.
Chat GPT, and I didn't like, I don't know if it was a girl or a man or a woman,
Oh,
like it was, just someone reaching out. But they sent me the screenshots, and so
that's so cool.
because otherwise I wouldn't have believed it, right? I remember thinking
Right.
like, yeah, no. So funny.
Well, and if we think about it this way, our souls are meant to find each other one way or another. So
Yeah.
even like where you're saying like waiting for the world to show up, like
Yes.
they're waiting to find you for
Yes.
your readings and like to explore that. And that it's so much has shifted over the
Yes.
last couple years in terms of people knowing what the Akashic records are. Like with flower essences, people are knowing because
Exactly.
maybe like 2018,
Yeah.
2017, Akashic what
Yeah.
was people would not know what you were talking about. It's like, how do you not know? And now it's everywhere, which is good that it's everywhere because then
Yeah.
that's opened up people's, I want to say, their minds and their hearts to explore that or at least know that it exists.
And to
So
kind of know like what the process is like a bit, right?
yes.
Because it's I like my I guess like my calling or my drive is really to talk about the Akashic Records being a really practical tool, right? Like I see some of the marketing around it, and I think like it doesn't resonate with me because this idea of woo woo, that's not to me, that's not woo. That's like my everyday life, right? It's like, how do we connect to spirit in a really grounded, practical, wise, intuitive way? So it's not about, necessarily telling the future. It's not about fortune telling. It's nothing like that, right? It's like, this is a really practical tool that we can use. And I'm, Capricorn moon, Cancer rising, Aries sun, like it's very grounded, very action, very, like, how can we actually use this for our benefit? And so I like this idea of, everybody's obviously going to read the records in a different way. It's all going to be based on intuition. It's all going to be based on your intuitive. I talk about intuition as a language. My background prior to doing this work was as a translator. So I worked for the federal government
Oh,
translating different languages. And so for me, intuition is just another language that people can learn. So some people are really good at speaking in the language. Some people are still learning the language. So it's a neat way of kind of looking at it in that way. But yeah, consciousness is definitely changing, and just even the things that people can do in the Akashic records, right? Like it just kind of opens up our awareness. You can just open up the records when you're in the middle of, maybe doing a podcast interview or writing content for your website, or maybe you're on Pinterest or
yeah.
any of those, right? It's just a way of sparking that intuition and allowing it to kind of flow through our everyday life rather than kind of something that we're seeking outside of ourselves. We're more doing the internal work, right? Because, sometimes people have a reading and they won't necessarily get kind of the results they're looking for, right? They're looking for their guides, their team to tell them what to do, right? Like, here's
Mhm.
step one, here's step two, here's step three. Sometimes that happens, of
Yeah.
course. You're in alignment, that's going to happen. Other time, and sometimes they'll kick your butt too to tell you that
Oh,
information.
yeah.
Other times it's like, no, actually, what the answer is, you need to tune into your own intuition so that you can take that next step, right? So it's people don't always like this idea, but it very much is bringing back the power to yourself. You are your own best, advocate, your own best powerhouse.
Absolutely. I even for myself will share with people like to openly receive the information, but if something doesn't sit right with you, like even if
Exactly.
it's coming from me or someone else you trust yourself.
Yeah.
Please trust yourself. Trust yourself first and
It's a
foremost because you
frequency.
know.
Right? I
Yeah.
think of sometimes Akashic records, information is like a frequency, right? So it's going to land differently in your body depending on what level of consciousness you're at, how prepared you are for the answers, how much you're really open to change, and kind of like you said, being with an open heart. It's like, if the information doesn't resonate, I don't want you to carry this for the next 5 years. You might just kind of jot it down and, do whatever with it. But you also have to be open to the fact that, at least in my case, when I'm communicating with someone's guides, is they're always, and maybe much like me, they're always on the cutting edge. So they'll
Yeah.
sometimes give you information that might not show up for a week. It might not show up for a couple of weeks.
Right.
And then 3 months later, they're like, "Oh, remember that thing you predicted?" I'm like, "I didn't predict nothing. I simply shared the information." But they're like, "It happened." And I'm like, "Oh, well, now it makes sense." Because neither one of us could make sense of it at the time. But then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, now I understand how I was in alignment. I understand I was supposed to make that change so that, I can move on to the next part of my life." Right. So I feel
Mm.
like all of these, it might not always feel like that to me, but I feel like all of these services are intended to move people in the direction of, better physical health, better emotional health, better mental health, and eventually better spiritual health, right? As we kind of navigate our life and depending on the experiences that people have had, right? Like I had an experience with death that was, people my age were not going through, right? People were not dealing with a long-term terminal illness for someone for so many years too, right? They call Alzheimer's the long goodbye, right? Or the longest goodbye, which is like, the person's technically there. Like my dad was physical healthy, like the body was good. It's only the mental that it's just like things degrade from there, right? So that's also really interesting, is that I saw this neat video. You probably already knew this, but I didn't know it until I saw the video. But it's that we could actually communicate, and I didn't know this at the time, but you can communicate with someone who may not be necessarily,
Yeah.
you know, fully conscious at that point. So it's like, oh, I could have communicated with my dad to figure out what he needed better. Well, that would have saved me so much
Yeah.
time, right? But
Yeah.
now, if anybody is going through that now, that's,
Yeah.
we can use the records to do things like that, right?
Hmm.
It's a way of
And
tapping in. It's like, what did his soul really need in that moment, right?
right. Because and that's the sad part of that when people are in maybe even like comatose states or where
Yeah.
they don't have all their faculties,
Hmm.
it's just perceived that they're not there,
Yes.
but that's actually not the case if we're looking at it from a space of consciousness.
Yes.
But at the same time, like you being there and supporting is what was helping as well. And I know you know that, but it's
Well,
just
and I use flower essence too. Like I didn't have a lot of tools at that time, over a decade ago when
yeah.
all this really was in the heart of it. And I had flower essences. So, even in palliative care, I would just put him down, even essential oils and just things that, he could smell something that was different than the usual, long-term care is different than a hospital, but,
Yeah.
kind of similar environment. Once you're on oxygen and you're kind of a little bit more advanced in things, then it's like, what tools can we use? Well, we can use flower essences because, minus the alcohol, which is just a preservative, right? It's like, we're just using it at a vibrational level, and even just sometimes to say to the soul, like, it's okay to go, right? You've probably heard those stories, right? Of, the person wasn't able to go until all the family members came, right? And then once the family members came, then it's like, okay, I feel safe to go on my way, right? So
Because they are there. They're
yeah,
consciousness, right?
exactly.
And it's like,
Even medical practitioners talk about this now, right? It's like just touching someone's hand when they're in a comatose state, and they'll remember things you said to them, right? They're just in a different space, but there's a part of them that's still present, obviously, in the body. Otherwise, the person would not be living.
yeah,
But yeah, it's very interesting. Like if medical science agrees to this, and
right.
some of the more metaphysical stuff agrees to this, then there has to be a link there.
Well, and they're seeing it. So I feel like before it could have been viewed as woo woo, or there wasn't the scientific
Mhm.
evidence or proof, like it just didn't exist. But at the same time, because consciousness is expanding on the planet, there are people that are doing the research,
Mhm.
that are fighting to have it seen and to have it recognized. Even sound healing is becoming more valued as a healing method. Ooh, question for you, with clients. What has been perhaps like one of the biggest transformations that you've seen, either
Mhm.
working with flower essences or Akashic, like what?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like, what have you witnessed firsthand through what, because it's a collaborative effort,
Yeah.
right? With you and them and whatever method you're using, but what would you say was a huge transformation that you have witnessed?
Mm. My my first thought was like the transformation in me myself.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds a little bit like hubris, but just this idea that we're always working on ourselves, and like I can't show up for my clients unless I'm in a good space, right? So physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? And sometimes people don't necessarily understand that, right? Like, oh, can you still do an Akashic record? I know you're sick. Like, no, you don't want me to do that. Trust me. That channel is dealing with the lymphatic system, and there's not, just being able to tap into that. But I think that, yeah, for me, the biggest change, also find it really interesting when I haven't seen a client for a couple of years. So it's like I saw someone one year, we did flower essences, we did some other kind of energy healing, and then I see them 2 years, 3 years later, and then their whole life is completely different, right? It's like maybe that was the catalyst that just got them started, or maybe it was just the thing that they kind of needed to start moving in a different direction, right? Like knowing, hey, I don't have to stay in this crappy job. Hey, if I want to have a child, then I need to do some more prep in the body to get me ready for that. Or maybe I left a relationship that wasn't healing or doing well in that way. But yeah, it's that's a great question. Actually, I've never been asked that before. But yeah, for me, like you notice the most transformation in yourself. Obviously, I find in this work sometimes it's challenging because if you don't see someone for 3 years, you might not have any idea, right? And then it's kind of like they show up and you're like, oh wow, like things are so different. And yeah, it's just you spend time obviously trying to catch up and see like what's new and what's changed. And I think it's really interesting too to have a lot of tools. Like for me, I have a lot of
Yeah.
tools that I can use. So sometimes people are not necessarily ready for the spiritual stuff. It's like, well, there's so much we can do just using it. I don't like the idea of calling flower essences plant medicine, but they are plant medicine. It's not associated with the other kind of plant medicine, which is, very different. A little bit more of a shock to the system than flower essences. I like to think of them as like subtle but sophisticated medicine. So like they can
Subtle
work
and
very
sophisticated.
gentle, but very in a way that is, quite obvious what they're doing. And I always find like the biggest cheerleaders are the people who would say like, oh, I would never use that voodoo that you're
Right.
into voodoo medicine, right? And then they try it, and then of course they become your biggest fans.
Yes.
Right? And even a friend yesterday was like, I know you told me to use this in the past and I never wanted to. And now my mom's using it. And what an amazing difference, right? So it's like just within 48 hours, they're, pain's gone, completely changed. Like they're just able to go about their activities of daily living in such a dramatic way. Like, oh, well, I know you told me this stuff worked, but I didn't believe it until they saw it for themselves, right? My husband's the same
That's
way,
so
right?
cool. You could lead the horse to water, but like they're gonna drink when they're gonna drink or not. And I
Exactly.
love when you were saying the biggest transformation was for yourself, because that's so often folks that are in our profession, it's like the reason we're even doing what we're
Yes.
doing is because we've gone down that path and it's transformed us and our lives, and you want to share it with everybody.
Exactly. Well, it's this idea of like, I had all the problems to begin with, right? So it's like, who best to start working on than the source of the
Yes.
problems?
And that, you know what? That I love that you're saying that as well, because that's being in integrity.
Yes. Oh, yes.
That's
Yes.
that's important, especially if people are entrusting you with their health, their well-being, everything. And one thing, yeah, sometimes I feel like that might be underrated, more
Yes.
underrated than it could be.
That's my top value. Integrity is my top value, and I run everything by that. And then, it would be disingenuous to my Capricorn moon to not have a high level of integrity. But it's like it's not snake oil, right? Like this. It's funny because I actually have a past life. There's a past life where I was the assistant to someone who was a snake oil salesman.
Oh, okay. And then clumps together in that.
Exactly. And it was a really interesting kind of duality because the person that was in this, and it's someone that is in my personal life from years ago, but they were selling snake oil as the like get rich quick kind of scheme. And I was like, oh, I don't think this is good. People are not getting better from this. And so it's really kind of, it's a reminder that the work that we're doing is not snake oil, right? It's not, people would say woo woo maybe, but I feel like there's a little bit of a casualness to that kind of language, right? So this idea of woo woo, it's like, no, it's like, it's spiritual growth, it's mindset growth, it's whatever, learning information about your soul or the work that you came here to do is not woo woo. That's like putting you on path. But yeah, that the idea of snake oil is just so funny to me, right? Luckily, nobody's ever said that about me, but
No, no, and once again, it's just like one quote unquote bad apple,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
can affect it for many people. But at the same time, if you are committed to being in integrity and knowing that you're helping and supporting people, and I love all as well where you're saying bringing things in a practical way, because
mhm,
it's not something that only a select few can do or only a select few can use. No,
yeah.
everything is open to
And
us.
and you don't have to go and sit with a flower and start channeling and do all that stuff. You can literally just put it on your pulse points and be like, okay, now I'm going to sleep better because my anxiety is gone, right? Like really, really practical levels, right? Like we don't have to go to that higher level. There's tons of people using flower essences that have no spiritual practice. It's not even a requirement. Some of the other things, Akashic records, you have to at least what I call be spiritually curious, right? That
Right.
might be kind of interested, but it's like a chat like you and I are having, right? So I feel like if we can kind of drop some of the veils around, because people see it as like, oh, you're like a psychic with your crystal ball, and you're like, some of the visuals that I've seen online, I'm like, no, not really. Like,
No.
you know, the phone calls I get are so curious, right? Because my my
Oh,
my number is public, and some of the conversations I've been like, no, that's not really possible in the records.
oh,
I don't know who told you that, but that's not good practice.
isn't it? Okay. I laugh about that because a couple years ago there was a local store to where I was living at the time, and they had stopped doing sessions and readings, so they would refer me out to
Oh,
people from the store. But yeah, some of the phone calls you're like, no.
I remember even a client like before they got on the call, they just want to make sure you're not doing black magic, right? And I'm like, oh no, definitely no black magic. But they were from an area where that was very common, right? So
Right,
it's like we never know what the culture is around
right.
where we are and what we're doing, right? So
So what are other things that you are doing and that you are offering?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing, which is I've been working on this for several years. So I started working on this in 2022, and it just seemed like such a big project with my vision, right? This idea, but I've more actively been working on it since the fall. So I've been, kind of putting all the pieces together that need to be in place. But it's called the Inner Healer Library, and it is just a way for we think about like practical uses. It's like a music therapy kind of track. It's encoded with frequencies. It's encoded with theta beats, so it works directly on the subconscious. And it's subliminal affirmations. So underneath the music, which we're just listening to, like, classical music or just kind of slow, kind of relaxing type music. Underneath it is the subliminal affirmations that help reset the brain and help reset the subconscious, right? So it's like, I am loved and I love myself, and I've just organized it by themes. So we have like sleep, and we have stress, and we have public speaking skills. We have visionary leader, which of course that's a good one for you and I, um, and abundance and prosperity and wealth and all the things that just you need a little bit of boost, right? So they're kind of standalone. They're not standalone tracks, but they're standalone bundles that you can just download. And so I've been working on that. I have about 20 tracks, and I have another 15 to 20 at least that are, we'll say, in progress, meaning I've started to work on the affirmations. Just thinking about like, how do I use hypnotic language, I use NLP, so different ways of really framing them. And just the affirmations alone probably take the most amount of time. And I like people to feel like really safe and secure with this kind of things, because of course with subliminal kind of tracks, you might not know what you're getting, right? So I always include the affirmations that are included, right? So if people are uncomfortable with the language, or if there's things, I wouldn't want to download a subliminal track and not know what it had inside it. So I like to just
Absolutely.
include the little link. And yeah, I call them like vibrational healing, right? Because it's the music combined with the theta beats combined with the subliminal affirmations. And I did a little trial where the first one that I'd worked on was the one that was on abundance, prosperity, and wealth. No surprise. I had lots of volunteers for that one, and people listened to it, and it was just amazing to see the shifts, new opportunities that came to them. Suddenly they had people buying from their shopping cart, they had programs sell out, they had a free call with a coach, like all kinds of stuff that came up. And I just thought to myself, like, it's the power of sound healing, as you know, right? But this is sound healing that we can do at home. It doesn't cost us a lot of money. These are very affordable tracks. And yeah, my goal is to just build this into a really great library. So I was thinking even this morning, I'm like, oh, I should have one for pregnancy. I should have one for postpartum, right? So
Right.
all these things, like you're nursing your baby at, midnight, and you don't want to be on your phone Zoom scrolling, but maybe you're just going to play the music in the background. And yeah, it's just a nice way of saying like, I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm an amazing mother, and all those things that, you just think of postpartum anxiety and depression is just a beautiful way of just kind of supporting in that way. So all the
Okay.
things that I needed.
Right. Well,
All
of
of these tracks
course.
are, yeah, I'm doing one for vision too, because I really want to get out of wearing my glasses.
Okay. Well, and it's real. Like if you're saying even like you've had people kind of doing like the
Yes.
trial
Yeah,
and
of
checking
course.
it
Of
out
course.
and the pathways are opening, you can't make that up.
No,
Like this is
exactly. 'Cause I knew it was working for me, right? So it's always like, is it, this idea of placebo, right? And sometimes I think, well, placebo, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not working. Like it, it's like regardless of the method by which it's working, as long as it's working. So I tested them all on myself, obviously,
of
and
course.
then, it's kind of like anything. It's like a flower essence, right? You might listen to it once, you might have benefits, but if you take it 3 or 4 times, you just kind of play in the background, right? I have one for business success, right? So I just play that all day long when I'm working. It's just a nice way of tapping into these energies, and like anything, it's shifting our energy, it's increasing our frequency. We need our frequency to be as high as possible. We need our vibes to be high to deal with whatever the, insert an expletive here kind of society we're living in right now. So I feel like these are just a really kind of affordable, really practical tool that people can use every day. And yeah, just download it and use it and love it.
So, okay, so it's the Inner Healer Library. So
Right.
you've got different categories or
Correct.
different bundle. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. So different categories. So I'll have like a bundle for sleep, a bundle for abundance,
Okay.
prosperity, and wealth, bundle for public speaking
Yeah.
confidence, um, all visionary leader, business success, yeah, literally 19 or 20, stress, just even stress relief and relaxation, right? So things like that. So yeah, it's just you can download single tracks, and then I have different bundles. So I have one that's called the Empire Builder, which is my cool entrepreneurs, female success, business owners. So that has a number of, I think there's probably 18 or 19 different tracks in that.
Oh, wow.
So like business success has 8 different tracks, right? So different ones have theta beats, different ones have just standard beats in them. So it's just a nice way of, if you want something, weight loss, right? So you want something more energizing for the gym. So I do tracks that are, give you a little more energy. And then other times
Great.
you want to listen to it when you're sleeping, then it's a little more relaxed, right? So every track obviously has to be retuned in a specific way, right? So I'm encoding it with all these frequencies and all of this, take my flower essences before I do them and call in. I work with a modality called future medicine. So that's an energy healing that just brings it right into the body. And yeah, it's a neat way of just like, putting it out to all the things, right?
Oh, I love that. And that is on your website,
It
as you
is.
mentioned.
Yeah. Inner Healer Library. Mm.
So, how do people find you? We're going to have all of this information in the show notes, but if someone wants to find you on social media or website or all of the places they can find you, how would
Yeah.
they? Yeah.
My website's always the best place because it's usually the most up to date. It's www.ashleighgrange.com, and that's Ashleigh, Leigh, which of course is a different spelling, but they say it's the English spelling. I'm on Instagram.
Sorry, I just want to pause you because I remember when you took Akashic initiation, I even knew your name was spelt like that. And in your introduction post, I spelled your name wrong. So, like, yeah, we need to clarify that.
At least I pointed it out, and then I didn't just continue like that. And I,
You.
I pointed out because my sister-in-law has married my brother, and of course she has the same name as me, but spelled
Oh,
the other way. So now I'm kind of like, okay, there's 2 of us with the same name. But I'm a little bit more public than she is.
yeah.
But yeah, so Instagram, Facebook, I'm on those places, and if people send me messages, I will see them. I'm not someone who's still actively kind of on that, I'll call it the social media hamster wheel. I found other ways. I'm really loving Pinterest. So if people are on
Yeah.
Pinterest, they can find me there. Yeah, and I had a Telegram group for a while that I really enjoyed, and I love connecting with people in different ways. But yeah, my website is always the best way to just kind of see there. I have a little shop, and you can see, what things are immediately downloadable, like free products, and then obviously paid products. Yeah, there's lots of, a Google search will bring me up pretty good. And then you can see all my Akashic Records testimonials that
Oh,
Chat GPT thinks I'm the best Akashic
yes.
Recorder in the CTA.
Oh, I have a question too. Knowing that, every case is going to be different. Everybody's going to be drawn to you for different reasons. However, from your hearts, what do you feel is a good starting place for someone to work with you?
I love being able to work on the emotional body. So, I mean, at this point, that's kind of where everybody needs to start, right? And it might be painful at first. There's going to be a lot of tears. But I love flower essences for that. I love the Inner Healer Library because that's, those things are permanent change, right? Like we've made those changes and they stick in the body, right? You don't have to then retune your mind. We're really just clearing things that are from decades and longer before. So I like those as different things. And if people have specific health conditions, like I always think it's valuable to kind of figure out what are some of the metaphysical things that are happening, right? So what are some of the emotional things that might be underlying candida or whatever health condition people have, right? Everything from, hair loss to heart disease and everything in between, right? These conditions are coming up as a way for us to kind of start clearing them. And the best way to start, if we want permanent change, is really the emotional and the mental. Because the physical stuff will obviously dissolve once the energy field is able to recalibrate. So I like those are really just affordable places to start, right? For less than $50, really, and that can include a consult even for that price, a custom blend and shipped off to people. And
Wow.
the Inner Healer Library is even cheaper. It's $22.22 for a bundle of tracks. So it's like
Tutu, tutu.
exactly, of course. I debated and I was like, oh no, it has to be. Because of course we think about the angel number of 222. It's being in relationship, it's being in partnership, which I think all healing is. So this is like my way of like really operating from my heart. So I could have made it 4444, but
Yeah, but that's trusting, right? Once again, trusting what you're being guided to, what
exactly.
feels right for you, and how you want to be of service.
Exactly. Yes, and like just allowing my heart to let me serve as much as possible.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for being our guest on Heart Path Podcast. And as I mentioned, we're going to have all of the info so you can find Ashleigh in the show notes. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And before you go, I wanted to offer you an opportunity for reflection and contemplation. Was there anything that came up in this episode that inspired you, that you can use moving forward? If so, what was it? Was there something that we discussed in today's episode that might have made you feel uncomfortable, perhaps even triggered? Was there anything in this episode that was brought up that has made you feel seen or understood? Taking a moment to go into the sacred space of your heart for the reflections or to journal. And please know that you can share your reflections with me on social media. I'd love to hear how this episode impacted you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend, like, subscribe. You know the deal. Lots of love. Mwah.